Hello, and in this tutorial I'm going to talk briefly about something called S3 objects. Now, we know in R we have objects that we write functions for, and the functions act on those objects. But in most other programming languages you have a much bigger emphasis on something called object-oriented programming, where objects have properties and are more concretely defined in terms of what they can do, and really objects that are at the centre of defining what functions can do for them, and not just kind of passively being acted on. There are two object-oriented systems actually three, but mostly two. One's called S3 and one's called S4. S3 is very loose and not really a well-defined system at all, but it's going to help us to understand the concepts. But then we're going to go into S4 and something called reference classes, which is basically S5. So we're going to start with S3 to get the concept, and actually most classes that you'll encounter in packages are actually S3 classes, so it's a good place to start. So all this talk of a class is an object type, really, and let's open R and take a look at what that looks like. So I've just got a blank R open here, and if I create a variable that says A is equal to 1, I can find the class of that variable by saying class of A, and it's going to tell me numeric, so that's what type of data can be stored in our object. But for the example we're going to do later, I'm going to use a string. So if we say, if for example I say test equals hello, I need to put quotations around hello, sorry, so that it's a string. Test equals hello. If I then ask what class test is, we're then going to see that it's a character vector. Now, if I want to define my own object type that I can have my own functions act on, all I do, which is a lot looser than other languages, is say the class of test is equal to something else. So if I, for example, say the class of test is nice, then if I ask again what the class of test is, it'll be nice. So what's the point of all this setting object type? Well, it means we can write methods for what are called generic functions in R. So what are examples of generic functions? Things like summary, plot, print, and functions like that take some input, and based on what the input is, they decide how to deal with it. So for example, if we just ask for a summary of our test object, because we haven't written a method on summary for nice, it just runs the default summary for a character object, which just gives us this information. But if we want to define a if we want to define a custom behavior for our new nice object, what do? Well, we can just write our own method, and that's going to be something like this. I did this before, so I changed the class name, but summary, so the name of our generic function, dot our object type equals a function which passes in the object and then deals with it to produce some unique output. So because our class is no longer called special messages, it's now called nice. I'm gonna change the name of that. So if we now say summary.nice is equal to our own function, and I submit that, now if we ask for summary our test object, rather than giving us the default summary output, it's gonna deal with our object in the way that we define, because it sees that it's a nice object. So what's the point of that? Well, if you've created your own function and you want to define a function to output some data, you might want to write a summary function, because that's how people expect data to be summarized in R. So it's a way to leverage those generic functions. On a side note, if we do type of and we ask what is the type of our test object, we're going to get a character, which, if you notice up here, was the original object type. So class is something that we can customize, but type of is good if you want to get the original kind of core R type of the object. So so that's kind of objects in S3. You don't define specifically what variables an object has. It's kind of this very loose, just define an object and define some the way that object behaves for some methods. So I hope this was an interesting first look at objects in R, and I'm going to do more of these videos in the future, show you how to write generic functions like summary and that, so that you can do different things with your own function depending on what kind of object was passed into it. One thing I should show you is that, like in other languages, you can have a form of inheritance. So rather than just saying test is equal to nice, I can say that the class of test is actually a vector of nice is the primary class, and then the fallback class can be test. If we rerun our summary function, because we defined what the primary class is going to do, we're still going to get the custom method that we wrote. But if there wasn't a method for nice, if we'd forgotten to implement one, it would then fall back and look for a method for test. So objects also have inheritance even in S3. Anyway, this was a lot longer than I wanted it to be, so thank you for watching. Hope you found it useful, and look forward to the next one where we're going to be looking at more on classes and generic functions. Thank you.